Welcome to Chicago Jewish Cafe. Today we have a very interesting guest, a person I've known now for 35 years, and a person who is very different from almost anybody that you will hear speaking from Russia. His name is Boris Kagarlitsky. He is a Marxist, a socialist. Now, it's difficult to imagine, somebody being today Marxist and socialist in the Soviet Union, in Russia, I'm sorry, although there's a lot of people, who are nostalgic for the Soviet Union. I do not know if Boris is one of them, but we'll find out. The number one question I wanted to ask Boris was about his opinion of situation in Russia at this moment. But yesterday, something happened that changed my first question. And that is two missiles dropped on territory of Poland. And the world for a few hours felt like it was about to go into a tailspin of nuclear confrontation and destruction. Now, thank God Biden reacted calmly, although we do not know if what he said is actually true, because the rocket may have been Russian, but he said it was probably Ukrainian anti-missile rocket that dropped and killed two Poles. If he's right, and let's see if he's right, we'll see. But whatever, the world has come once again, to a very horrible situation. And the number and possibility of such situations, the way I see it, is going to be increasing in geometric progression. And this is my first question to Boris. Boris, how do you take it? What do you think of what happened yesterday?
Well, hi, Alexander. First of all, I'm very happy to see you again after so many years.
I am very happy to see you.
We haven't seen each other for quite a few years, really.
Right.
And just before answering your question, I have also to make some kind of disclaimer saying that I'm not nostalgic for the Soviet Union, though there were quite a few interesting and positive things in the Soviet Union, which we are missing. And still, it doesn't mean that that I'm nostalgic for the Soviet Union. Just yesterday, on our YouTube channel, Rabkor, we had a discussion with Konstantin Sermin, who is another Russian lefty, who seemed to be very nostalgic for the Soviet Union for quite a while, and I was really surprised because he said that Soviet nostalgia is becoming a reactionary force in the current Russian situation. So it means that there is a very interesting and very important change even within the left-wing community, in the sense that Soviet nostalgia is now associated more with conservatism and with some kind of neo-imperialist ambitions of the current regime. So in that sense, it completely lost any critical potential.
But they're nostalgic not only for the Soviet Union, they're nostalgic also for Tsarist Russia.
Exactly, that's the point. They managed to kind of integrate nostalgia for the Tsarist regime and for the Soviet Union, in the sense that they completely wiped out everything in the Soviet experience which can be progressive, which can be seen as something associated with enlightenment, with the welfare state, with upward mobility for the masses, and so on and so on. So they cleaned out everything progressive from the Soviet experience. What remains is exactly this kind of imperialist authoritarian heritage, which they, of course, take completely positively. So, well, on the other side,
they bind for traditional Russian values, whatever
yes,
they are.
exactly.
Maybe
They see the
serfdom, maybe slavery. I do not know what they mean.
Absolutely, serfdom, anything. So they see the Soviet experience as just the continuation of the big state, nothing else. It's just the big state. There used to be a big state under the Tsars. Then there were some problems in 1917, and then the big state recovered. So, well, okay, it's Nicholas II or Stalin, it's the same thing. Anyhow, so what I'm just saying is that we are now in a very new ideological phase in Russia, in the sense that up to some point, it was possible to say, look, in the Soviet times, they used to have this and that, which worked, which was developing and so on, whether it's science or culture or anything, and it's not there anymore. But now we can't say that, because anytime you speak about the Soviet Union, they're saying, okay, that's also something we are missing. We used to have a lot of tanks, many more tanks than now, and so that was the great thing about the Soviet Union. And just to add one more point for our American audience, who, for the people who probably don't know me, I used to serve 13 months in prison for political activities in the Soviet times, for being Marxist, by the way, which is
in Lefortovo, yeah.
Yeah, which is because it's also very interesting that quite a few of the dissidents and underground oppositionists in the Soviet Union were actually socialists or Marxists of some kind, who didn't accept the official version of the ideology. But anyhow, let's get back to your question. I'm sorry for making this long introduction.
No
but
this is very good, because
things,
we need to see your answer in context.
Yeah, just to make certain things more clear for the American audience. Now let me say something which will probably very much surprise you. As far as I know, in Russia, maybe in Moscow, I don't know. I have plenty of contacts around the country. Nobody was really afraid yesterday about the Third World War coming. Everybody was pretty certain that nothing was going to happen, and nothing happened. So maybe it's part of Russian fatalism, but I think more it's
I'm not sure. I agree with you that was the feeling, but it's not a part of Russian fatalism. It's part of the fact that they know that there's no NATO aggression being readied against Russia.
Sure. No, it's
so if they don't attack themselves, they're not going to be attacked.
Yes, exactly. There were plenty of reasons. But anyhow, people are extremely worried about the war. And but here is a very interesting aspect of it, because well, up to September 21st, when the official mobilization started, Russian society was divided into three categories. There were there were about probably 20-25% of those who supported the war, who supported Putin, supported the war.
20, just 20-25%?
Not anymore.
Really?
Not anymore. There were about 10 to 15% of people who opposed the war, and there was a tremendous majority, a great majority, or overwhelming majority, of those who didn't care at all.
Boris, you're not afraid to call this special operation a war?
But that's because when
what
I
happened?
speak,
or in English, war is not vaina.
Well, Alexander,
yeah,
that's one of the reasons we are speaking English now.
Oh, okay.
If we were speaking in Russian, I would have called it something else.
Because as I understand, they already designated you as a foreign agent.
Yes.
So congratulations. Are they paying you any money for that?
No. They're trying to find me, but so far it didn't work because of the.
Well, they want money from you. They do not want to give you money. I thought the foreign agent was
make me pay. They're trying to make me pay, but the legal procedures in Russia are very slow. That's another interesting aspect. But I'll finish with that, but then I'll get back to my point. You see, the problem is that Russian law and Russian courts are extremely unfair, but at the same time, they're extremely slow. So that means that once they're issuing a verdict, which is absolutely terrible and absolutely contradicting any legal logic, then the next point is that they're very slow to implement. The whole machinery moves forward in a very slow way, and so far they spent already I think 6 months already, yes, trying to make me pay the first fine of 10,000 rubles, which is not a lot of money, which they so far failed to make me pay because, well, we just write complaints, we fill in a complaint, that the complaint is processed and so on and so on, so the bureaucracy is extremely slow. Well, sooner or later, of course, they will make me pay it, but anyhow, what I'm saying is that there are good things about Russian bureaucracy as well, not only bad things. But let's get back to the point. And the point is that, as I told you, there were about 25% approximately of people who supported that whatever we call it.
I thought that the initial figure was like 85%.
Wait a minute. Let me be clear. Wait a minute. I'll explain. I'm speaking about the kind of research we were doing ourselves, and it completely contradicts the official figures. By the way, it didn't. This research didn't make us very optimistic either, but it contradicts the official figures which you usually get. So the point is, the supporters of the war, of the operation, whatever you call it, were no more than 25%. The opponents were no more than maybe 15%. There is a tremendous majority which didn't care, or to make things even more astonishing, didn't know about it, didn't know. There was a very famous meme in Russia. А что случилось? Did anything happen? Well, really, а что случилось? So this а что случилось is a tremendous majority. They didn't care, and they didn't know. Then we started checking what was actually happening with these people. We discovered a very interesting point. The tremendous majority of Russians who were polled or who got into focus groups and so on, they didn't watch political programs on television. They didn't watch any opposition channels on the internet. They didn't care about politics at all. They didn't care about anything except their family, their pets, their jobs, their orchard, their dacha.
That is before September, before mobilization.
Yes, that was up to September 21st. So there were millions, literally millions of people in Russia for a few months who didn't know that there was a war or a military operation going on. So that is one of the reasons they use this term special operation, because special operation is something which happens somewhere. Some professionals are doing their job. You've heard about it? Yes. You forgot it the very same moment when you hear about it. You forget it in 5 minutes or 3 seconds. It's like, well, somebody reported some special operation by American forces in I don't know, in Pakistan against Osama bin Laden. Okay, it took a few days. It happened. Nobody cared in Russia because it's not about us. So some special operation was taking place in Ukraine. Russian forces, special forces were involved. So what? It's not about us. It's not about our life. So that was the general feeling. So and then speaking about how the official polls were made. You see, because what we discovered contradicted completely the official polls. So then we started asking people who actually made official surveys. And there we discovered an extremely important point. Most people in Russia refuse to answer to pollsters. So before the war, the number of people who refused, refuseniks, so to speak, отказники, were 75 to 80%. After the beginning of the war, after the 24th of February, the number increased up to 90%. So in that sense, polls didn't reflect anything except the meaning of those 10 to maybe 15% of those who agreed to speak. And of course, the initial reaction was kind of positive. We thought, okay, people are probably afraid to tell the truth, to tell what they think about.
Mhm.
And then we discovered it's not true. It's not, again, as I told you, it's not that they were afraid of expressing their opinions. They had no opinions whatsoever, just no opinions. They didn't care, didn't understand even the words used by the sociologists.
How can it be? How can it be? I mean,
Russians became totally apolitical. They totally reject any news about politics, any news about social
so
activities.
just self-blackout.
Total blackout. So you can be extremely concerned if you're discussing the issues like fishing, hunting, your orchard, maybe your job, relations between men and women, and so on and so on. Family issues, children, kids, pets. Most popular channels are about individual psychology and relations between men and women in the family, relations between parents and children, how to breed your cat, and so on. It's incredible. You know what is one of the most important debates you really discover within the internet? How to understand your cat. If you ask online, you ask this question, how to understand, how to communicate with your cat. You'll get millions of viewers. Millions, literally, immediately. You'll have tremendous success. If you discuss, if you ask what to do with politics, what to do with the war, what to do with social rights or political rights, well, you'll get an audience which will be very excited, but it will be a very small audience. You see? And so in that sense, both pro-Putin and anti-Putin people are in total minority in the country. And that explains much of what's happening in Russia, because in the West, they often ask why certain things are happening, why no one is protesting.
But that was before. This is not the case now.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting now to this point. But so people were asking why nobody was protesting. There were quite a lot of people who protested, but they were suppressed. They were suppressed by tremendous repression. We had like 3 years of permanent repression. Some people are in jail. Quite a lot of people had to leave the country. Quite a lot of people are simply afraid after
3 years, you say, right?
3 years of permanent and very, very successful repression. So, and then you see, so there is a very politicized minority. There is also there used to be a pro-Putin minority as well, but there is also an anti-Putin minority. Left or right doesn't matter. You see, again, all people who have any convictions, left or right, they are a minority. That's the point.
But you're sitting in Moscow. Aren't you afraid too?
Well, I'm not afraid of speaking English. I'm not afraid of speaking Russian either. But when I speak Russian, I just use different terms.
Different words.
Different words, yes. Because you can follow, you can watch Rapcore. In Russian, you can see that we speak quite openly. But of course, we don't use certain words because of the digital era, because the digital censorship works in a specific way. They're just hunting for specific terms and words. If you don't use
and your protest against the war was removed within few weeks of being posted.
Yeah, we removed a few. We didn't remove the content. We removed certain texts which use certain words. For example, when I write text in Russian, I almost never use the word Ukraine. I write about a country to the west of us.
To the west, not to the south?
Not to the west. No, next door, the
Okay,
neighboring
next door,
country.
neighboring country. Okay.
The neighboring country, the country to the southwest, whatever. And the digital censor doesn't get it. You see, that's how it works.
They haven't taught this.
Well, Russian language is very rich.
Right.
You can invent quite a few words that you have to change words time and again. And there are quite a few people who do the same. If you're following the Telegram channels, they're very critical, they're very aggressive, and most of them survive. And usually they use some, the language of Esopus.
So it's certainly not Soviet Union yet.
Not yet, but in the Soviet
In the
Union,
Soviet Union, you would not be able to open your mouth. This conversation would not be able
censors
to
were
take place.
humans.
Huh?
The Soviet Union censors were humans.
Yeah.
They read the content.
Yeah.
And now they're
phone
robots.
calls, letters, whatever.
Sure, but here we have robots. Robots are we have stupid robots written, designed by stupid people very often. Right. So now getting to the 21st of September, 21st of September, the difference is quite visible. And by the way, speaking about the opposition, at least especially speaking about the left and progressive opposition, I just advise our audience to check out a site called Russian Dissent, where we have text translated from Rabkor, from our website, into English.
We're going to put a link to that website below this video.
Very good. So we have a few texts written also by people who were discussing what happened with the so-called mobilization, or so-called partial mobilization. By the way, in Russian is it's very interesting. You will get it. Probably some of our viewers will get it. In Russian, частичная мобилизация, partial mobilization. And if you have you want to have the abbreviation of that, in Russian will be chmo. Chmo in Russian means a useless person or something like that. Chmo it's a word which represents somebody who's totally useless.
Well, this is sort of like Yiddish shlamil.
Exactly. So частичная mobilization is chmo, and people who got mobilized called shmobiki. So it's
Shlamils.
Exactly. So it sounds absolutely terrible. It explains much, But anyhow, on September 21st, millions of people who were absolutely apolitical, who didn't know much about what was happening, who didn't care about what was happening, they suddenly discovered, oh, something happened. These people, the authorities are going after us. They're really going after us. Because the social contract of Putin's era was based on this principle: you do not mix into politics. You do not care into politics, but the government will let you live the way you like. So, well, just don't try to get somewhere. Don't try to make a political career outside of the official structures, of course. Don't support any activities. By the way, even pro-government activities, unless they were especially organized by the specialized structures designed
by approved organizations. If they are organized by approved, then they're okay. If unapproved, then it's not okay.
Exactly. No spontaneous activity, even in favor of Putin. Even in favor of Putin would be bad. There was very funny cases when people were actually arrested for pro-Putin activities, which was spontaneous and not organized by some official bodies. So that's just your private life is your private life. Nobody cares. You may not even pay taxes. Nobody cares. But just don't mix up into politics. And then the state is not going to go after you. And then on the 21st of September, the state actually went after many of these people. They were doing absolutely stupid things, but also partly because the state itself was not ready for this kind of mobilization activity. They didn't prepare for it. They demobilized the military and state operators itself for so many years because of this very same social contract. So because they didn't need people, actually. The state was completely alienated from the society, so they didn't need a society. So they didn't care how to mobilize, how could it be, how should it work if they were going to mobilize the society. So in that sense, the very practical activity of mobilization was also extremely disorganized, but also sometimes really very severe. For example, in Yakutia, they were just running into villages. The police was just running into villages, encircling the villages, and taking away all males within a certain age, and sending them.
That was you were in Yakutia, right?
I've been to Yakutia quite a few times.
I mean, recently. Did you go there recently?
Last time it was exactly in March when the war erupted. That was the last time.
Okay.
But I have a lot of contacts there, so people speak to me online almost every second day or every week. So, but that was really scandalous. So they were just, it was like a kind of military operation. They were catching people. I don't know. But interestingly enough, what happened next? I just called a friend of mine there in Yakutsk, said, what's happening? What the hell is happening? And he said, well, it continued for like 2 days. What happened on the third day? On the third day, we locked our houses and we picked up our guns. In Yakutia, almost everybody has a gun because they're all hunters. And it all stopped immediately because it became clear they were going to shoot back.
To shoot back at who? At those people that delivered notes to them?
They were not just delivering notes; they were just coming with police and picking up.
So they would shoot back at police?
Exactly.
Wow.
There were cases of shooting, actually, in some places, not in Yakutia. In Yakutia, it became very clear. Once it became clear, because everybody knows everyone. So you just call local policeman. You're not going to shoot him. You're just calling a local policeman saying, you know, guy, if you come too close with those others, I'm going to shoot.
Very
and
interesting.
Understands everybody, everything. He understands what's it just stopped immediately. It stopped immediately, and more was interesting. Then they started releasing some people who were already kind of kidnapped from the villages, but these people were already in Khabarovsk. So imagine when you get drafted. So what happens? They take away your passport. They take you're not allowed to have money, though in fact sometimes they do, but officially you don't. So you don't have any documents. You don't have money. They take you to Khabarovsk, which is a few thousand miles away.
Right, far away.
And then at some point, a telephone calls, and they say you have to release these people because there is too much problem with them back home. So they released quite a few people, but imagine you have no money, you have no passport, you are 3,000 miles away from home and have to get back. Now you are free to go. You are free to go home. Interestingly enough, they all arrived home safely, by the way.
But they can't function in a country without passports, without documents. This is the main document.
In Siberia, you can. In Siberia,
you can do it without passport?
Exactly.
Wow.
Because autostop was it after stop. You just pick up a car.
Yeah.
So every car, it's a pickup. What's it? The English for that? After stop. So they were. You just go to their road. You wave your hand, and every second
Oh, you mean
driver.
to hitchhike? To
Yes, hitchhiking. Yes,
so you can hitchhike, but
that was
still, when
English.
you get back to Yakutia, you need your passport. Where are you gonna? What are you gonna do
No,
with
no.
that?
Once you get back to Yakutia, then you'll get your passport back. But you have to
You will get a
get back
passport. Okay.
first. You have to get back to Yakutia.
Mhm.
So hitchhiking for a few thousand kilometers.
So
People,
there was a lot of hitchhikers.
yes,
Uh,
but it's typical Siberian because it says there is a tradition there. If somebody is asking you to pick him up and bring somewhere, nobody refuses because everybody knows, given the climate, otherwise a person can just die if you leave him on the road. So
I'm
everybody,
aware. I was there, and hitchhiking is one of the way of getting around.
exactly. So they say they got back, but but it's a challenge. Really, it's a challenge to make a few thousand miles.
Boris, but let's
But it
get
just,
Mhm.
yeah, yes, okay, but let's get back. So, but I'm just giving you just one example that resistance did work. There was a resistance and then did work in many cases. There were protest actions in Buryatia, there were protest actions in Dagestan and so on. There were quite a few people who burned down military commissioner's office, offices, and so on.
Recruiting officers.
Recruiting officers, yes. But also enormous numbers of young people left the country, enormous. We don't know the exact data. Some people are saying that it's about up to 1.5 million. There's different data. There is no exact data because nobody collected the data officially. We know that after the beginning of the war, about 4 million people left the country. That was the official data. It was officially released. Interestingly enough, it was released by FSB, by the secret police, which controls the border guards. They control the exit from the country. And interestingly, I was really surprised that they released the information about these masses of people who left the country. And that was even before September 21st. And since September 21st, we didn't have the data from the Russian side. And people left for different countries. So we have some data from Kazakhstan, some data from Georgia, from data from other Central Asian countries. Somebody left for Turkey, somebody left for Israel. Some people managed to get into Finland. By the way, the most scandalous case was with the Baltics, with the newly independent Baltic republics, who refused to accept Russians who were fleeing from the mobilization, who are kind of fleeing from Putin regime. And more, in Estonia, one guy managed to cross the river into Estonia, trying to escape from mobilization. He was taken by the Estonian guards and given back to the Russians.
Horrible, just absolutely horrible.
Absolutely scandalous. So in that sense, well, these countries where they have the governments which are officially opposing Putin and so on and so on, but in terms of
But this is not the way to oppose.
Exactly. In terms of helping individual people who are trying to escape from this regime, they were absolutely terrible. On the contrary, Kazakhstan was extremely friendly. Once they arrived, they were really greeted by locals. They were met. There were people who immediately arrived with soup kitchens, who brought these immigrants to the offices to register, make them to facilitate all the processes of
You mean in
registration.
Kazakhstan? Where?
Kazakhstan, they were extremely friendly, extremely friendly. I know that for a very good reason that quite a few friends of mine who left for Kazakhstan, and they all reported very friendly, very positive attitude of the locals, and people were friendly. They were giving the place to sleep. They were providing food, water, and so on and so on. So that was really very positive.
Kazakhs were very friendly to Jews during the Second World War too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And by the way, one friend of mine who lives in Kazakhstan, he called me from Almaty. He said, "Well, it looks like getting back into my childhood years when Almaty was mostly Russian speaking, and not only it's still a Russian speaking, but Russian, German and Jewish city." He said, because Almaty was mainly not Kazakh, it was mainly. It used to be mainly Russian, German, and Jewish. There were three major communities there. And Kazakhs, of course, there were always Kazakhs, but they were a minority. And of course, now it's also Russian speaking, but it's mostly Kazakh. And he said, I went into a pub and I saw there were just Russians from Russia and Jews from Russia. Only Germans were missing.
Meaning Germans left, what, 10,
Germans
20,
left,
30 years ago?
But yes, Germans left many years ago, but they're not returning. Now Russian Jews are returning.
Right.
And Germans are not. They're quite pretty safe in Germany. They don't have the reason for. Though I know one German guy who actually returned to Kazakhstan. Interestingly enough, he's a very popular rap singer in Almaty, leftist, by the way, called Desar, and he sings in Russian, sometimes in German also. So he's extremely popular. You can get him online on the YouTube. So anyhow, what I'm saying is that the situation started changing, and it is changing. And I think the society finally is beginning to get politicized. So people are becoming aware of what is happening, becoming aware of what kind of country they're living in, you see? So the world outside of their orchard and their workplace is kind of becoming visible for them. And what they discover is not something they like, you see? So it's a little bit like what was Truman Show. It was there was this American film where a guy was living in a kind of artificial world which was disconnected from the real world. It was just kind of locked, and he thought he was living in this small world.
People are awakening. You know, I have to say this. I myself would have never thought of Russia until recently the way I think about it now. Never. It never entered my mind. But when I see Dugin and I see people like him, you know, and Putin and everybody else, you know, saying and doing things, and they're in power. And my question to you, Boris, and that is a big question. I spoke to some other people, you know, and my question is this: is there's any part of Russian history on which Russians can draw in order to make themselves a different country? Now, when I look at when I ask this question, I mean the following: that those Western republics, Baltic republics, you know, even Ukraine, you know, 30 years, 6 elections, 6 freely elected presidents, yeah, corruption and everything else, but freely elected presidents. In Russia, Yeltsin is giving power to Putin, you know, and things like this, you know, and elections, free elections, yeah, there's some parties, but they play, you know, the tune that, you know, that Putin wants. So my question to you is, because that is a big question for me, is it possible for Russia to transform itself? Because Russia, one element in Russia that I see is Russia is not mono-ethnic society. It's multicultural society. So it has different issues and different problems in transforming and becoming democratic society, because attempt to become democratic may result in Russia falling apart.
Well, I don't think it's going to fall apart in the sense that ironically, Russia, given the kind of economy we have now, which is mostly the economy of producing raw materials and selling them abroad, needs to stay in one piece exactly because otherwise local elites and local businesses have very little chance of reaching out to the foreign markets. So you need this huge space to be more or less organized, more or less, well, as a united, integrated market and safe space, because you have to transport all these raw materials.
But Yakutia also can, you say that they need, the rest of Russia, but I say that Yakutia can just chop itself off.
No,
So
no. There is, it's very interesting. When you're in Moscow, they say, oh, you're flying to Yakutia, there is a lot of separatism there. And then you come to Yakutia and say, where are the separatists? The separatists. Oh, yes, we have the problem with the separatists. Or Evenki, the old, another small population. Oh, they want to get to separate from Yakutia. Yes, we do have this problem, but it's not very serious. So the very idea of separating from Russia doesn't even come into people's minds. But
so if you give power to for people to vote freely, to organize, to agitate for their own elected officials, you don't think that they're gonna elect officials that are gonna say, well, it's time for us to go our own way?
No. The point is that they will try to take over control over the federal center, definitely. And of course, the regions, they are, especially in the north and the northeast, they're interested to get a bigger share of their financial flows, which are generated by their own resources.
And if they don't get it, because the other parts of Russia,
they change the power. If they don't get it, they will try to change the power in the Kremlin.
So they'll try to separate, to secede, right?
No. If they separate, they will get zero. You see, the point is, if they separate, they just don't get the financial flows. The financial flows are not only centralized, they're integrated. So if you're separate, you just don't have the way to make profit from your resources. But the problem is that the center controls everything in such a way that you don't get the fair share. So the question is whether you're going to be able to get the fair share of your resources, which of course are produced with the help of the federal structures, federal market, and so on. But in Russia is really very different, because this very last electoral campaign, which was in September, the previous September 2021, I spent time in Siberia. So mostly it was Irkutsk region, Yakutia, and it's really astonishing, Kolyma, where where the Gulag, the worst Gulag camp located. So, and because there were some, let's be very clear, the parties at the top level are completely controlled by the presidential administration. All the top party leaders are completely controlled. But on the grassroots
when you say
level,
party leaders, which party do you
whatever party, every party which is in the Duma, maybe with the exception, even if this exception is very dubious, exception of this kind of small new party called New People, but it's also not independent at all. All other party leaders are totally controlled by the presidential administration. Like the lists of candidates are before getting presented to the people, have to be approved by their very same presidential administration. Imagine a government which selects the people who are going to oppose it. So if they don't approve you, if they don't approve the names, these names are not going to be on the list. of candidates. But that's at the top level. At the local level, the situation is different. You just cannot control every single person, every single borough, every single town, and so on. So the situation is very different in different parts of the country. And the further east you go, the less control there is. So that's why I was quite happy to be involved in the campaigns which took place in Siberia, just because there was less control. There were candidates who were who had, of course, to be very careful about not provoking the authorities too much, but who were genuine. They were genuine, and that was mainly in the official Communist Party. Which, by the way, quite a few of these people left the party once Zyuganov supported the war. So there was a real dissent within the Communist Party. And by the way, not many other parties had any.
What percentage of votes does Communist Party get now?
It depends on the region. Usually it gets about 12 to, we don't know, because I can just give an example that in some regions, let me be clear, that's one of the reasons why I was in Siberia, because in Siberia they count votes. In many other regions they don't count.
What do you mean? What do you mean in Siberia they cannot vote?
They count votes.
Oh, they count votes.
Mm-hmm. They count votes. Mm-hmm. And if you go to some other places, for example, there was a so famous Saratov mathematical anomaly. So that in every single constituency, in every single polling station, the percentage of votes which were taken by every single party was the same.
How so can it be?
They didn't bother counting. They didn't bother counting. They just got the data before the vote actually happening. You see? So they didn't bother.
So to make life better for people, so they don't need to bother with voting, right?
Exactly. No, you can vote or you cannot vote. It doesn't matter, because your vote is already counted.
We already know how you're going to vote, so you can stay at home.
Yeah, you can stay home, and nobody cares. In Siberia, at least in some places, they really count votes, and there is very little fraud. Or at least there used to be like that. I don't know what's going to happen now, because now it's very different. But what happened when we won?
Boris, if I'm going to ask you a question, which segment of Russian society actually wants to be able to vote and to speak openly and to move and associate any way they like? Which segment of Russian society?
Well, first of all, I think, well, but let me finish with Yakutia, and then I'll just have, so because in Irkutsk they counted votes, in Yakutia they counted votes. In Yakutia, actually, after that campaign, the Communist Party actually won the election. They won the election. They won 36% of the vote in the first place.
Meaning they won freely and honestly.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. They managed to vote free. The Communist Party managed to win the first place freely and honestly. And even though, of course, they lacked access to the official television and so on, but everybody there used WhatsApp. We mainly campaigned putting videos on WhatsApp and traveling. And in Irkutsk also the result was good. But the funniest thing was in Kolyma. In Kolyma, first when I arrived,
all prisoners voted communist, right?
Fortunately, interestingly enough, they. Well,
or they voted or they voted Wagner's group.
Listen, let me tell. First of all, it was before the war. Okay. No, it was September previous year. So actually, of course, people who were in Gulag, most of them left, many years ago. I don't know if there are any people who survived Gulag who stayed over. There are plenty of memorials. So plenty of
Memoirs.
memorials. It's very depressing. Sometimes it's impressive also, because also Gulag was producing huge constructions. Anyhow, and when they told me that there were some good communists who are going to run in Kolyma, I said, well, are you kidding me seriously? And is anybody going to vote for them in Magadan? And I said, well, look, people do not care anymore about what happened, and of course the communist candidates there are not praising Stalin. Of course, definitely they're not. They're actually kind of praising communists who were in Gulag as victims of Gulag and so on. Like in Yakutia, it was the same thing. That was they were praising people who established the Yakut Republic, who were all murdered by Stalin, and they have all these pictures and the portraits of all those people who were killed by Stalin and who were communists themselves. But anyhow, when I arrived to Magadan, I went to because I was running this campaign. I went to the deputy governor of the place, who was in charge of electoral policies. And he was extremely open. He said, we're not going to allow you to have more than 10% of the vote. Just like that, bluntly, just like that. Just sitting next to me.
We're not going to allow you to have more than 10% vote, meaning that we're going to campaign very hard against you, or
no, it means no matter what, we will count the votes.
Whatever votes are going to be counted, they're going to be less than 10%.
Exactly, exactly. So it was so blunt, open. So it's not like wait a minute, forget about campaigning. It's not about campaigning, it's about counting.
It's about counting. But don't all parties have some representation at the counting table?
Yes, but it doesn't matter. If you do not like the way they count you, they kick you out from the.
Or if you tell them, that they don't count or overcount, they tell you, if you don't like the way we count, you can leave.
Listen, one friend of mine in Bashkiria also was sent as an observer to the elections, local to elections in Bashkiria. So it was not in Ufa, it was in their district, district town. So once he arrived, it was a guy from Moscow. He arrived in 10 minutes. A police officer arrived, said, "Hello, we know you. We know who you are. We know that you're a serious person. So I have two options for you. One option is, look, open the door. You see this door? Open the door. There is a table. There is caviar. There is cognac, vodka, good salad, Olivier salad. If you need anything else, we'll provide. Anything else you like, just tell us." And he said, "What's the second option?" The second option is, I will arrest you now.
It's either caviar and vodka or a little bit of jail.
So, but this guy said, but this will be illegal. I said, of course it will be illegal, but I will arrest you.
That's good.
So I said, so I asked him, what did you choose? I asked him, what did you choose? I said, guess.
I don't know, I guess caviar.
Guess.
Yeah.
So you see that says counting votes is not part of the problem for them, but finishing. So once the final count was made in Magadan, The Communist Party got 20% of the vote, not 10. So it means that in reality, they maybe got 50 or 30.
Really? Wow.
You see?
Mhm.
And it's not because people are nostalgic for communism, but they just hated the officials.
Mhm.
And they knew that the only candidates who were any kind of opposing the regime were from
So
that
they
party.
vote not against, not for the past, but for the present, against the present.
Exactly. So in that sense, I can tell if we have free elections, I don't think that much of the existing elite is going to survive any free election. Because yes, they will have some supporters people who are just loyal to any power, to any government. But at this point, the people are extremely angry, really fed up with these people, and the majority of people are fed up. But it doesn't mean that there is a lot of understanding where next. Everybody is fed up with corruption, is fed up with even those apolitical people. They're partly apolitical because they think there is no way they can change things. You see, you just turn to your orchard, your dogs and cats and your family, because you know there is no way you can influence anything. You just forget about everything. But once people suddenly get the feeling that they can influence something, well, I don't know, they can become very active. Though we don't know what will be next, because then the big question is not whether people are opposing or supporting the current situation. The big question is that they don't have a perspective. They don't have a clear idea what to do with their own lives and with their society and so on.
But it seems to me that they also do not actually take seriously into consideration the ability to vote. I mean, if
Exactly.
there's such open theft of votes, and I do not see a lot of people protesting it.
No, there were quite a lot of people.
A lot of people protesting it, right?
Yes, but there were quite a lot of repression. There was a lot of repression. There was a lot of repression. There were quite a few.
So my question to you, Boris, can Russia ever be a solidly democratic and law-abiding society?
Well, I think it will be.
When?
No.
And how?
Well, when I think, depends on what we mean by democracy, because one thing which is very clear is that the current regime is in trouble, deeply in trouble. Once this whole thing happened, with this invasion into Ukraine started, I met a friend who was a Belarusian immigrant in Russia. By the way, it's another point. Russians are running from Putin to Kazakhstan, but there were Belarusians who are running.
Belarusians are running to Russia.
Russia, yeah. And so we were discussing this thing, and I said, "So what's your impression?" He said, "Look, from people from the former Russian Empire, we have a good tradition. Once we lose a war, we organize a revolution, or a reform at least. So every time Russia loses a war, it's either a major reform, like it used to be, as you know, after the Crimean War or after Afghanistan, or there is a revolution after it happened after the war with Japan and the First World War. And that's the kind of feeling. Now you can speak to quite a few people. I told you, I traveled a lot. I keep traveling. And there is a feeling that
So right now there's a feeling that something is going not right.
Something's going to change very radically and very soon. The question why I answered in a Jewish way, I answered to a question with a different question. What do you mean by democracy? You see? Because one thing is to change, even to change the system, political system at least, to change the personnel which is in charge of power, even to introduce certain rules. The other thing is whether it's going to be stable, and whether it's going to be working. This is a totally different question.
This
And
is the question, because in Tsarist Russia, the stability was provided by the nobility. I mean, there was a large class of people, that actually had vested interest in continuation of Tsarist regime. In the Soviet Union, the stability was provided by KGB, ЧК, KGB, and KVD. That was the stability. It continues to be the case under Putin. So my question to you is, let's say that Putin disappears. Who is going to provide stability in that Russia?
Well, I think local bureaucracies.
But they need to be organized themselves. They need to be.
Oh, they will do.
They will organize themselves on their own.
Yes, they will do. You see, first of all, you must understand one interesting thing. Local bureaucracy is a very interesting phenomena that makes the country going even now, and they're extremely integrated because on the one hand they are running provincial governments, on the other hand provincial governments, not the very top people, but I mean the people who are actually running the bureaucracy, running the apparatus, they are in a very difficult situation because on the one hand there is Moscow, which keeps knocking at their heads with all sorts of orders and so on. And on the other hand, you have local people, both local elites and local population, who have the interests of their own and who are extremely desperate to get something out of, get something done for them, and very limited resources, because the center doesn't let the regions to have resources. So they have to function in a very, very, I should say, active and innovative way in order to make things done, because they're lacking resources, they're lacking real power. They keep getting stupid orders from Moscow, and they stay under tremendous pressure from below. And you see, every time something goes wrong, what happens? Moscow says, let regional authorities solve the problem. We're not going to help them seriously. Recently, during COVID, the central government kind of disappeared. They tried to hide, they were kind of, what's the English for that? Shine with their absence. There is some sort of term for that. So federal government was nowhere. They were not visible. All problems were solved with very little resources. They were solved by local bureaucrats, and they started establishing horizontal links between themselves because the federal government didn't do much to help them. And now it's interesting what's happening with the so-called mobilization. One of the reasons why mobilization also goes so badly is that to some extent it's sabotaged at the local level, but also then you see strange things like soldiers who are mobilized and taken to the trenches. They're complaining that local authorities didn't provide weapons for them or didn't provide bulletproof vests for them. And say, wait a minute, it's a federal army. It's the governor or the governor's office. They don't have to do anything for you. They're just providing.
The Russian army did not show itself very well in this war.
No. But because the federal regime, the federal authorities are totally bankrupt in organizational terms. They're failing everything.
So you contradict yourself. You say that bureaucracy is the solution, and now you say that federal bureaucracy did not do that well.
Well, that's exactly. I think that local bureaucracy is the
local.
of networking. It will be networking to keep the things going. It will have to. But not the governors themselves. The governors are part of the top operators. But then you have all these people who are pulling the coach, pulling the things.
How many regions there in Russia?
Officially now 89, including 4 regions which were annexed recently, according to the official constitution.
So 77, right?
89.
89.
If you get rid of 4 annexed regions, then
85. So you say that the governments of those regions would have the power that now
yes, they will be networking. They will be networking.
they would be networking.
Most probably, the governance will be changed. The governance will be changed very, very fast. Most of the governance will not survive.
You say that Chechens also going to continue to be part of Russia?
Well, Chechens will try to. Chechen population will be very happy if Russians help them to get rid of Kadyrov. Chechens will need Russian troops to get rid of Kadyrov.
But I think once the situation is going to develop the way you just imply, they're going to get rid of Kadyrov themselves.
Not necessarily, because he terrorized people in a very effective way. But again, let Russian army solve the problem. I hope they will solve the problem at some point. Again, the military do not seem to be very happy with what's happening. I don't think so. As far as I understand, they're very unhappy with the war and so on. But let's see. It will take a few months for us to understand the results of the war. It will become very clear in maybe January, maybe February. We'll see what comes out, and then we can speak again about all this, and we'll see whether things are getting better or worse.
Well, let's see what is going to happen. I hope that there is some way for Russia to be stable, democratic, free society. So far, I do not see the way, but maybe
we'll have to try. Alexander, I think I'm getting out. I'm running out of time, actually, at this point.
Okay. In any case, Boris, I thank you very much for visiting us here and for speaking your mind. And, it's amazing, 35 years we have not talked. Now we talk. And I have a feeling like we continue, where we stopped 35 years ago. Yes.
Sure.
I appreciate it, Boris. Anyway.
Okay. So I have to get off there.
And we're going to put the link to your project right below this video, and people should be encouraged to help you because what you do is important.
Okay. Thank you, Alexander. I have
See you, Boris. I'll talk to you. Bye.
Bye.